of austerity, and a country like Germany that's enforcing austerity, it seems to have more of an ideological than practical significance there.
Sugiero, what do you think about that? Has austerity made things worse? I mean, I'm sure people in Greece and Spain will agree, okay, but globally?
Well, I would say that it depends on which country you're talking about. I mean, if one can afford to take that methodology, yes, that's fine. But there are many countries that cannot, and unfortunately there are quite a few of them, I would say, in the Eurozone. And this is a whole structural problem. This is a whole thing. I mean, we're getting to, I think, the core of the problem, because there's just so much divided opinions and preferences and priorities depending on which country you're talking about. At least, for example, Japan, we just given that as an example. It was one country, so we could unify a consensus whether it was wrong or right. But in this case, you can't even reach a conclusion. And while you're doing that, you're just losing a valuable time while you're not really making a decisive method, be it the austerity or being expansion of economy. You can't take one-sided view, and you can't really take the stance in it, meaning that you cannot get the full-fledged benefit from taking any of the policies that had been adhered or agreed.
Okay, essentially what we just heard there, Martin, is that the toolbox is empty. They've tried just about everything.
Well, I mean, they're discussing about austerity versus growth or stimulating growth. That's complete nonsense. None of this can work because the debt is already totally out of control. People need to understand that, need to realize that 200 trillion fiscal gap, there isn't a way to possibly pay that back. And anybody with any idea of economics at all, they know that Spain, Greece, Italy, Portugal, they are just totally, utterly hopeless. And, we have just got the news, Greece, unemployment up to 25% and rising, Spain downgrade and so on. They are just totally hopeless. Now, really, as you have been saying just now, it's really a question, will they bail out the top 1% through inflation, or maybe they let those banks simply go under and let some of those wealth of the bankers disappear, and maybe go through some bankruptcy reorganization, like Glass-Steagall type of bankruptcy reorganization, where they put some of this casino type gambling parts of the banks out of business and just let the banks concentrate on the real lending to productive enterprises of the economy, something of this nature.
Chris, I agree with Martin completely, but what about the people here? It seems like the system has completely failed the people, and I'm calling it capitalism. It's failing the people.
Most certainly, but the present crisis can be seen as part of a much longer-term trend since the 1970s. I think that Sugiero, in raising the question of Japan, again points to a kind of deeper historical dynamic at work. The question is, what regions of the globe could offer the possibility of greater dynamism and growth in the global economy as a whole? And I think that, all things considered, the last 30 or 40 years have been a general slowdown, not entirely made up for in the 1990s. And so, I think that a lot of the policy decisions, a lot of the controversies about growth have to do with deeper problems that go, far back before the present
But it's interesting,
crisis.
if you go from the 1970s, Sugiero, if I go back to you in London, this is the financialization of the economy. That's really a significant change over the last few decades. Has anybody learned their lesson?
Well, I think, it should go back to your initial question, if I may, because to answer your second question as well. The fact of the matter is I think we're all mingling capitalism into one. Okay. Now, there is a liberal type of capitalism and non-liberal type of capitalism, and in the past decade or 15 years, what we've been seeing is the liberal type of capitalism that reigns. And I'm not going to criticize this totally, because when we have innovative changes or changes of technology or changes of economy, when we have that tide change, they win a lot because their allocation of resources, as well as their human resources, funds, is very quick to pounce on it, as you saw in the IT revolutions in the United States. But when things do go sour, as we're seeing right now, the non-liberal type, which tend to have much lesser shock of the social phenomena tend to win out. So it just depends on who plays where. But the problem was, I think, that it's not only the academics, but it's only the media and also especially the financial arena have resorted to praising this liberal type too much and totally ignored that the tide of times have totally changed. And they continue to push with this liberal type, and this is the reason why I think stems down to this problem that we're having right now in this arena.
Okay, Martin, quick word from you before we go to the break. Go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, I would also like to throw in, it doesn't really seem that capitalism everywhere is failing. Asia is doing pretty well, I would say. A number of other emerging market economies are too. And here, capitalism is pretty much well and alive. You see the housing prices in the U.S., very weak, but here, they're going through the roof. Maybe because a lot of people are fleeing to Singapore and Hong Kong to escape, the West these days. But it's not only that. Really, fundamentally, the economies are a lot stronger, and they don't have all the debt problems that you see in other places. And I would also say,
I want to jump in here. We'll continue talking about the emerging marketing world when we get back from that break. After a short break, we'll continue our discussion of the global economy. Stay with our team. Okay, Martin, I'd like to go back